Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Gwyl Crime Cymru Festival, which we're able to bring you through the generous financial support of the Welsh Government. So before we start, one of the things that Crime Cymru Collective was set up to do was to promote Welsh crime writing. So at the beginning of our festival event, we're running a 3-minute crime close-up slot introducing emerging authors. And this evening's crime close-up author is, I'm delighted to say, Anna Britton, and I'll allow Anna to introduce herself.
Thank you, Graham. Hello, I'm Anna Britton, and I'm going to be chatting a little bit about my debut novel, Shot in the Dark. And I'm going to be reading a bit of the first scene for you now. Run. Her foot slips on a patch of wet leaves. There's a wrench from her knee to her hip as she slams down onto her hands. She scrambles back to standing. Pain flares with every step, but she cannot stop. She clenches her fists and runs on. Breathe. The cold air is harsh against her throat. Trees steal the scant light of the moon, illuminating the forest in sharp shafts. She can hear rough panting behind. She stumbles, imagining it racing over the undergrowth, nimble on 4 legs. Run. The desperate struggle for each breath becomes mingled with sobs. Her hurried steps shorten. She pauses beside a tree and wipes her face on her sleeve. She shouldn't stop. Every moment she's still, it gets closer. Climb. Running is no longer an option. She hauls herself up into the tree, hefts her weight onto the lower branches and reaches again. Steadying herself on her uninjured leg, she climbs higher. Her arms shake, her fingers numb except for the sting where one of her fake nails snapped off. Her palms slip over the rough bark. Fuck! The dog crashes into the tree trunk. Ignoring how her joints twist and ache, she pulls her legs up as it snarls and thrashes. Through the great cloud made by her breath, the dog hurls itself at the tree. It leaps and claws. Dirt and foamy spit coat its white fur. Its bulging eyes are fixed on her, but she's climbed out of reach. Click. She jerks upright. Pain lances down her leg, but she twists, squinting through the forest. Her eyes struggle against the changing light, the natural movement of the trees. She's only heard that sound once before. Blood leaps in her veins. It's not just her and the dog in this forest. And that's the first scene of Shot in the Dark. Unfortunately, the young lady we've met meets her end quite quickly after that, and we move on to Detective Sergeant Gabe Martin's point of view, who's trying to solve the crime, the murder, with Detective Inspector Juliet Stern. So it's got 2 strong female leads at the heart of this story. It's set in Southampton and New Forest, so it's got that mixture of city and rural places. And it's full of emails and texts and reports, so you feel like you're solving the mystery alongside Gabe and Juliet. And I'm really excited to share that the second in the series, Close to the Edge, is coming in September this year. And that's all from me. Thank you very much for having me, Graham, and I'm going to pass back for the police procedural panel.
I mean, wow, that was an incredible first scene. I for one, will be clicking on Amazon as soon as we finish this. I won't do it now because that involves multitasking. But brilliant stuff, Anna. Well done, and really looking forward to book 2. I'm sure you've got a fan here. So thank you everybody for joining us. This is, I need to get the name of this panel right. This is called Beyond the Beat, and I'm delighted to be joined by wonderful authors, Jacqui, Harrett and James Oswald. So I don't know, you can put the cameras on. Here we go, there we go. Look, a big reveal that was. Jacqui and James. So welcome Jacqui and James. We'll do some introductions first of all, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion. So I'm Graham Bartlett. I'm a former police officer, 30 years in the police. I now am a crime writer, and I've got a very unsubtle frame of my books behind me, in case you wondered what I'd written. And I also advise other crime writers and run courses and tutorials on getting crime fiction, getting policing and crime authentic in crime fiction. So that's me. My books are As you see, Bad for Good, Force of Hate, and City on Fire. They're my fictions, and they're based in Brighton, and they feature a character called Chief Superintendent Jo Howe, who people say I'm really cruel to her, but I'm not really. I just like to make life a little bit difficult for people. So, Jacqui, welcome.
Thank you.
Who are you and where do you come from, as they say?
Right, well, I'm Jacqueline Harrett. I'm the author of the DI Mandy Wild series, which is set in Cardiff broadly, because I have been living in Cardiff for over 30 years, even though you would probably have guessed by now I am not Welsh. I'm from Northern Ireland. I like to set my stories around Cardiff so that I can go to places and visit them and give a bit of authenticity to it. I like to sniff around places, if you like. I also co-author contemporary fiction with Janet Larne, and our novel What Lies Between Them was published in 22. So different things.
Brilliant. And I've read my first Mandy Wild book, and we'll come on to characters in a minute, but just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. James, welcome from the farm in Scotland.
Hello, good to see you all. I guess I better introduce myself. I'm James Oswald, author of, mostly known for the Inspector Maclean books, of which there are far too many to number now, set in Edinburgh. I've also written a series featuring Detective Constable Constance Fairchild, the last of which, Nowhere to Run, is set largely in Aberystwyth. I'm not Welsh, as you can probably hear, but I did live in Ceredigion, outside Aberystwyth, for 10 years. And that mainly inspired my other series as an epic fantasy series called The Ballad of Sir Benfro. So I've written quite a lot in and out of Wales, but now mostly focusing on Scottish crime fiction.
And likewise, just been introduced to, and brilliant stuff. We're going to get into the detail of that. I should really claim my Welsh roots, shouldn't I? So all I can claim, I'm afraid, is that my paternal grandmother was Welsh and from Cardiff, Jacqui. So maybe sort of walk the streets that you write about. So so I'm a quarter Welsh. So I think I've got a quarter of a right to be here. So this is about police procedurals and how far we as authors and veer from reality, and how much our readers will allow us to get away with, and certainly expect us to kind of deviate a little bit. But both of your characters, Mandy Wild and Tony Maclean, I mean, I don't know whether you were nervous when I was reading your books. Most people are, because they're just going to pick it all out. He's going to, and absolutely, they are brilliant books, and nothing in the books jarred for me at all. But Jacqui, can you just can you tell us a little bit about Mandy? Because she's a complex character, and she's got a bit of a gob on her as well, isn't she?
Oh yes, she certainly has. Yes. Well, first of all, I didn't know I was writing police procedurals, to be honest with you. As far as I was concerned, I was writing mystery stories, and it was my publishers who kept saying to me, the police procedurals. And I said, no, it's a mystery. It's a mystery story.
That sounds like something Mandy Wild would say. That sounds like an argument she'd have with them.
Yeah. Yes, she is quite a complex character. She's got a twin sister. And Mandy is really the black sheep of the family, because her father's a wee bit on the dodgy side and has taken himself off to Spain to disappear. Her sister, her twin sister, dabbles in drugs and is a bit of a problem character. And Mandy's a bit of a maverick. So she doesn't really like to do things by the book. She likes to find out the truth, but she do things in her own way, and she has to be pulled apart really by her sergeant Josh, who is very much a straight down the line, you do it by the book or you don't do it sort of guy. So she needs that balance.
And I love the way that she's the maverick, but her dad's dodgy and having to live in Spain, and her twin sister's the drug user. So it says a lot about my previous career, doesn't it? As a police officer, she's the maverick. Okay, well, I'd love to talk a little bit more about with grey consequences in a little while. But James, as you say, Tony McLean's been around now for a while, and he's kind of well established, and now obviously having to suffer the world of Police Scotland rather than his own Loathing and Borders that he was in before.
And that caused me a lot of trouble because the first two books in this series I wrote a long time ago, actually, whilst I was living in Wales in the mid 2000s, and it was Loathing and Borders. And I mean, I wasn't really trying to write police procedurals. I really dislike that word because it makes it sound really dull. But they're police. They're mysteries, but they just involve police as the main characters. But yeah, then I moved back to Scotland to take on the family farm, and then started writing the third one, and then Police Scotland came along, and I remember getting in touch with the few people connected to the police that I could find, and asking them, how's this work? How am I going to make this? And none of them had a clue, because it was all new. It was, I think they're still finding out. It's been what 8 or 9 years now since it came in, and or 10 years, and they're still trying to find it out. It's basically just Greater Strathclyde now. Strathclyde took over everything, but which is great fun for writing conflict in your stories, because you've always got this different areas, different forces rubbing each other up the wrong way, and it's a gift to any writer, that sort of thing. But I really shy away from procedure in my books as much as I possibly can, as you may have noticed.
And I think you're right to do so. I mean, I too don't like the term police procedural. Even my books I don't think are procedural. They're well, the first one is well, I think they're police thrillers. I think that's more, but police mysteries, police thrillers. I think that's much better, because as soon as you say the word procedure, I'm thinking forms, I'm thinking computers, I'm thinking sitting at my desk. I'm thinking all the stuff that made me fall asleep, and that's not what our readers want. But for our sins, James, Tony's left the police, hasn't he? He's suffered the fate of what happens to all long-serving series, that they have to leave eventually. I mean, he found a good way around.
Yeah, he left at the end of the previous book. I mean, he hadn't reached retirement age or been forced out or anything. It was just that the way that investigation had fallen out had rather dire consequences for the entire charitable sector in Scotland, or certainly Edinburgh, and his team were getting the flack from that. So he basically handed in his resignation to protect his team. But he was also absolutely knackered and fed up with the politics of it all. I think a lot of police officers just want to get on with doing the job, but there's so much politics, particularly when you get above a certain level. You probably know this better than I do, Graham.
Absolutely.
And he was just hacked off. So he took the opportunity to walk away. But of course, he's kind of married to the job, so you can never stay away forever. And also, I had a contract to write 3 more books. I had to bring him back.
But you've done it very. I mean, tell us a little bit about For Our Sins then, because you've done it very well, and as I said, very authentically. But tell us a little bit about the story, because it's a really dark one, isn't it?
My stories do tend to the dark, but it basically is a series of old lags, old gang members. Turn up in disused churches, having been horribly murdered, and the leader of the gang, who's sort of semi-retired but hasn't gone to Spain, basically calls on Tony McLean and says, "Look, sort this out," and tries to bully him into doing, investigating. And McLean's saying, "I'm not a police officer anymore," and the guy's sort of saying, "Well, I can't go to the police; they won't pay me any attention, but you might." And it all goes back to something which happened, 40 years earlier, which we see in the opening scene, which sort of ties into abuse of children by by people in authority figures like priests and teachers and things. And that was very much the initial inspiration for the book. I remember I was reading an article about how a lot of churches were being sold off or redeveloped for offices and housing and stuff. At the same time as there was a big thing in Scotland with Nicky Campbell coming forward about there's a teacher in his school had been sexually abusing a lot of the children, and it finally went to trial. And a similar thing, I went to a boarding school myself in the mid-70s, and one of the teachers there was sexually abusing some of the children. He didn't abuse me, but that came out about 5 or 6 years ago, and he's now serving at His Majesty's pleasure, having justice finally caught up with him. So that kind of fed into the whole idea of this. It takes a long time for justice to be served sometimes and sometimes it never is with these cases.
No, hence what happens in your book. And I think you deal with it so cleverly because it is such a delicate area, and it could be quite triggering for people, but you do it with such skill that you know it's there, but you're not seeing it. It's not graphic at all, but you know what's going on, and it's there for a reason. It's there to kind of bring the story forward 40 years effectively, and it's brilliantly done. And I take my hat off for you.
Oh, thank you.
To you for it. Jacqueline, obviously you deal with other. I mean, interestingly, whilst James is just sort of killing people across Edinburgh, with Grave Consequences, it's probably the first crime novel I've ever read which doesn't actually have a murder in it, but it's incredibly addictive, probably even more so because I read it with my heart, I really did. So tell us a little bit about the story and Mandy's involvement.
Thank you. Basically, the idea began, we've got a very large cemetery near us called Cathay Cemetery, and I got lost one day wandering through it. I thought I'd take a shortcut and then got lost. And I thought, gosh, this would be a good place to find a body above ground. And that's where it started. And I tend to do that. I tend to find somewhere and I think, what if I found a body here, and who would that be? And it's all about identity, really, finding out about who that person is. And of course, I'm very conscious of not giving any spoilers.
Hard, isn't it? It's really hard to do that, yeah.
It's really hard. But basically, they find a body of a teenager. It looks as though either she's taken her own life or it's been an accidental death. And then the investigation uncovers all sorts of other things that are going on, so that it's less about the death and more about the life of the girl that they found. And as I say, it goes into all sorts of complications that I do not know where they come from.
But they're brilliant, and they give a real essence of that the policing isn't straightforward. These things are never straightforward, and you kind of you lift one stone and you find another one underneath, and you lift that, and so it goes on, and you've got Mandy kind of absolutely doggedly she needs to get to the bottom of this, despite herself, despite the way. I mean, it's just she ends up with a complaint, doesn't she? And she said she has to admit to her boss, well, I may have called him a prick, it's just because she just knows that she's just a hand grenade waiting to go off. But by the same token, she's as skilled a detective as Tony McLean is, in that she's absolutely driven, knows what she's doing. It's just her methods are kind of get her into trouble from time to time.
I think that's so I'm sorry to butt in like that. I mean, it's the same with your books, Graham. You've got your detective is just driven to do the job, and I think that's what we like. Well, certainly for me as a reader, I like to read books where you've got these borderline obsessive compulsive characters who just they have to find out, regardless of the damage that they end up causing. And that's what makes the story so great. And I did love Jacqui's book was excellent. And it wasn't until you said earlier that, you know, actually, yeah, it's a crime thriller with no murder in it, which is, it can be done, and all the better for it, I think.
There's a load of other crimes in it, but just not murder.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's the way it can be. So, Jacqui.
What fascinated me with reading both your books was the fact that you both had really strong female characters, because even though Toni McLean has gone into semi-retirement, Janie Harrison has taken over his mantle, and Jo Howe is just, well, talk about dogged. I mean, the things she faces and the things you do to her are really cool.
I know, I'm getting a real complex about this, about what I do. and I mean, I don't know, how do you find that, Toni, writing women characters? I mean, I feel a huge sense of responsibility to make it authentic. How do you find that? I mean, you're more experienced an author than I am.
I mean, I write a lot of female characters. I'm a little bit. I kind of cringe internally slightly when I hear the phrase "strong female character," because you never say, "Oh, that's a strong male character," and and it's kind of, you're almost sort of deliberately doing. I just want to write female characters, believable female characters. Janie Harrison is great fun to write. She started off. She's basically named after my godmother. And I introduced her in one of the earlier books. She was only meant to be in for one book. Someone had said, because my godmother's a great fan of the books anyway, and she'd also, every Christmas and birthday since I can ever remember, she's given me book tokens, as she still does. I mean, I was confirmed 40 plus years ago, but I still get book tokens for birthday and Christmas from her. And so she gave me the gift of reading, so I put her in my books. But she became a really fun character to write and a good foil for Toni McLean, because I'd done 6 or 7 books there which are almost exclusively from Toni McLean's point of view. So apart from the occasional scene from the victim or the killer, it was just Toni McLean all the way through. And it was getting quite difficult to keep that fresh. So having another character to write was great fun. And I think that's it. All you can do is you can approach it and try and make the character as real as possible. And not necessarily trying to make her strong particularly, but you know, any woman who's going to rise up through the police ranks is going to be a strong female character anyway, I expect. So you just kind of try and write her as real as possible.
I mean, that last point is really true. I mean, I found that when writing Jo Howe, that the reason I made Jo Howe Jo without an E was because she was doing the job that I did in the town that I did it, in the city that I did it. So I thought, how can I, as a debut author, so, you know, really just try and finding my way, how can I not write this autobiographically? So I thought the first thing I could do is just change her gender, and then I can kind of work from there. But that, you know, talk about sort of, you know, Pandora's box, that threw out a whole new set of challenges, and, you know, understanding what it's like for a woman to rise to that level in the police. Completely different journey from my own, completely different barriers, and, you know, much harder for them to gain the credibility and the eye of the senior officers there. And I work with some fabulous former senior women officers to help me create Jo Howe, because, you know, it's a different story. It's a different story. But I mean, one thing that I loved about Janie is she's temporarily promoted to DI, and she's not really suited to it, and that's not a gender thing. That's I want to be out there kicking the doors down, and obviously Nelson, who you know is a wrong one, Superintendent Nelson, you know, he does remind her that actually she's a DI now and she needs to behave like a DI, and that's something that we all go through. You know, I remember when I got promoted to inspector, just think, yeah, okay, well, you know, you're giving me more money, but can I still go and do the fun bit? And I go, no, you can't. You can't do that anymore. But I mean, Mandy is a strong woman, but she's got these kind of this other side to her as well, and you balance it really well Jacqui, you balance that kind of the personal angst and the personal sort of trials that she's going through with the professional, and I think that's a lot of crime writers, particularly sort of newer crime writers, forget that police officers are human beings first and foremost, and then the police officers second. So with Mandy, but you've definitely piled it on with her, but she's popular nonetheless amongst her team. Sometimes obviously she's irritated to them, but how did you manage to write her so kind of authentically? Because I said to you in an email earlier in the week that it was incredible reading both your books about how authentic they are. And I never talk about realistic crime fiction because that's boring. How authentic they are, bearing in mind you haven't had the benefit of 30 years policing that I have, which made it easy for me. So how did you do that, Jacqui? How did you kind of craft her so well?
To be honest with you, I think I'm a bit like James. I try and avoid the procedural as much as possible, because you'll notice that most of the interviews don't take place in the police station. So it's as if she's just having a chat to somebody and trying to find out a little bit of information from them. So she doesn't push it in that way. She doesn't throw her weight around. She tries to do it more gently, which is really in contrast to the way that she would like to be. I think really she'd quite like to get a few of these people round the throat and throttle them, but she manages to have one face for her team, one face for interviewing her suspects, and another for dealing with her sister and her niece. So she is somehow, by some miracle, a complex character. I just don't know how, to be honest with you. She just sort of sprang into the page and came to life, and I just let her go with it.
And brilliantly so. Yeah, let's just, to the kind of the theme of the panel. How important is it? I know we've all said that we try and avoid procedure as much as possible, but how important is it to get kind of certain details authentic, and how far are you prepared to veer from it, James? You've obviously written a lot of these, and you've had to deal with the Police Force of Scotland selfishly merging while you were writing them, which I think you've probably got a right to complain about that. But how do you manage? What's your take on accuracy in crime fiction?
I always cleave to the idea, and I had a long argument with Peter James about this at one point, that things need to sound plausible rather than necessarily be accurate. And I also, if I find myself when I'm writing, I find myself desperately needing to know what an actual piece of procedure is, to the point that I might have picked up the phone and called someone for some advice, then I will go back to that scene and see how I can write it without needing to know that, because I don't want to get bogged down in that procedure. And subsequently, I don't really know very much about police procedure at all. I just you get the rank structure right, and then the rest is just trying to keep things as plausible as possible. And I've muddled through 17 novels that way.
Pretty good muddling. Pretty good muddling, James.
But it is always that watching out for it, and I think we've talked about our strong female characters or our strong characters or whatever, and for me, characters lead. And then everything else is just dressing to what the characters are doing. And if you get the characters right and their reactions right and their emotions right, then you can kind of glide over the details of the procedure, which are actually the bits that people would skip when they're reading anyway.
Quite right. Yeah, no, I quite agree. It's interesting what you say about Peter Chat. I've written a couple of non-fictions with Peter, and I advise on him, and I think he's probably moved on, because I think his take now is he likes to know everything and write sparingly. And I've got this story about spending an hour on the phone to him describing how violent prisoners are managed in the community. It's called multi-agency public protection arrangements, once they've been released from prison. And I'm literally an hour talking him through this because it was an area that I specialised in the police. And I thought, God, that's going to be so dull. And it was literally half a paragraph. He just gave a nod to it and moved on. I mean, I use this term when I'm working with people. You don't have to get it right, but don't get it wrong. So if you are going to go into a detail, so if you're going to describe an arrest, and if there's a good reason for you to describe what happens in an arrest, you need to describe it well. But you don't need to. You might not even need to describe it at all. So you can gloss over the stuff that doesn't take your story or your characters forward.
Exactly. So, I mean, you can just say that, yeah, the guy's been arrested. You don't actually need to detail the arrest procedure because it's wasted words, really.
What about you, Jacqui? What's your take on getting it right versus making it good? That was a really weighted question there, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think, like James, I think the character, but I mean, I know you yourself have said that the story is king. And to me, sort of getting the story right and trying not to put my foot in it somewhere. As James says, if it's something and I think, oh, I'm not quite sure about that, I just leave it out. I just go on to the next scene and get through it.
And as I say, you both do it really well. And I quite often get people who say to me, oh, what happens at a crime scene? What happens? How do the scenes of crime officers, swab everything? And then what happens to the swabs when they go back, and how do you get the DNA? And what happens to the DNA? And I go, why do you want to know all that? I can tell you. Of course I'll tell you. But, surely you just want to know someone's got a knife in their chest and forensics have identified who that person is. And then the action is trying to find them and chase them and deal with all the red herrings. Why do you need to know, what colour the tubes are that they put the little swabs in and how long it takes to get to the lab? It's just dull.
It's also, I mean, one of the things that bothers me slightly about it. I mean, we get obsessed about all these details, but it's worse even, I think, in television than in books, because you get this obsessive attention to detail, which is subservient to story, so it's not necessarily right, and you end up with it. Everybody thinks that they're an expert, and then I did a panel at Bloody Scotland a few years back with Professor Sue Black. And she said that she finds it really, really frustrating because she goes on she's an expert witness in complex forensics cases, and she puts out all the information, and the jury don't believe her because they've seen an episode of CSI Miami or something. So I kind of fight against this idea that we're really, every detail that we put in our books is 100% accurate how the police would do it. So every time I get asked, how much research do you do, or do you do your research and all this sort of stuff? So no, I just make it all up.
You're going to put me out of a job here, James. Can you not?
Sorry. I'm not saying, but as you say, I mean, when you spent an hour on the phone with Peter James talking about this thing, and he condensed that down to a paragraph, and that was fine. And he's finding out the stuff, and then his skill as a writer is just finding out what part of that hour's conversation is necessary in the book, and it might only be a couple of lines, or using the correct term just the one time. And that's the research that you do. It's the best research doesn't show on the page, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And both of your books are peppered with those just kind of almost those sort of those comfort blankets for me, thinking, you know what you're talking about, and I don't want to know all of the procedure, but I just, I think Jacqui, in yours, you talk about, you just say, is it Amy's found with a knife, isn't it? And you go, yeah, but it's just a folding pocket knife, so we're not really going to do anything with that. And that's actually from legislation, but you're not spelling it out in legislation. You're just spelling out, but it's only a folding pocket knife, so we're not going to worry about it. And that just, both of your books gives me that comfort blanket. And certainly, as I say, with Janie, in the way that she responds to, reluctantly being a DI and not doing it very well, makes me. I mean, I honestly thought, well, you'd spent 2 days watching somebody who'd been in Janie's position, but you clearly got it right, because I suppose if you understand your characters, that is going to be their reaction.
I think, yeah. I mean, I didn't, when I wrote that scene, I didn't even know whether you could do that. Just on the fly promote someone up, because you desperately need the position filled. Um, and I just kind of assumed that maybe you could, because you can do it in other lines of work. I know with the police, you've got you've got all your exams and stuff that you've got to take before you can do these things. But again, that's a detail that you can just hint at. You don't really need to go into the full details of it. And it's a constant thing because I mean Tony McLean's a DCI now, so he really would be just behind a desk all of his life. But that doesn't make a good good story. You want him to be going out talking to his informants and visiting crime scenes and generally making a nuisance of himself. And that's why we have all these cops are generally maverick cops, because they're not going to be doing the stuff that they would really do if they were real life coppers. Are they?
No, exactly. And I can just imagine the conversation if I was saying to Mandy, Mandy, you can't, you can't keep going. You can't go knocking on all these doors. I think she'd just give me a look and just turn out and get in the car and go and do it anyway. Whatever the rank differential. So you're creating characters that are because of the way you've created them, they're able to break the norms. They're not really rules; they're just norms. That DCIs don't really go out very much. DIs don't really go out very much. But frankly, if they're that kind of person, no one's going to stop them. So you've just created that ability to do them. And yes, if there's an urgent operational need, somebody can just be temporarily promoted in the field. So well guessed, James. That was a great one.
Well, the other thing the other thing I work on the principle is that 99% of my readership don't know any more about the police than I do. So if I do get it wrong, it's only Tony Graham who's going to take me to task for it. So
yeah, but if I do, you can just say, yeah, it's different in Scotland. It's different in Scotland. Yeah, it's Scotland. Yeah, it's all different. So Jacqui, you're about to.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jo Howe doesn't do as she's told either, does she?
No. And I have to have a rider in the front of my book basically saying that, yeah, I tell other people how to make it authentic. But for creative purposes, I've thrown all that out the window. No, I mean, Jo definitely doesn't do as she's told. But I think, like in your books, when they don't, you're giving the nod to the reader that this is not normally how a DI, DCI, chief superintendent will behave, because either somebody's going, you shouldn't be doing that, or junior people to them are kind of looking up a bit odd. I mean, I worked on a TV program called We Hunt Together, which was on Alibi TV. I think it was on BBC as well subsequently. But they desperately wanted this detective superintendent to be at a search of a farm where they were finding body parts and things. And I said to them, well, she's not really going to be there. And they went, yeah, but we want her there. We want her there. So I went, yeah, okay, all right, well, we'll go with that then. And I said, if she turns up after the main two characters, who I think were a DS and a DI, if she turns up, because she was quite a bullish superintendent, turns up and just kind of arrives and kind of, almost like a ta-da, I'm here. If you just get those two actors just to give each other a kind of knowing look, it's like, oh my God, what's she doing here? That's it. You can then carry on with it, and that's what they did. Of course, the actors did it brilliantly. But it was just a way of telling the viewer that, yeah, she shouldn't really be here, but that's kind of what she does. So here she is.
The policy of less is more.
Exactly. I mean, it's hard to write that kind of knowing look in the book without get it absolutely right. But Jacqui, in your book, yours is, I mean, both of your, I don't want to give anything away, but both of the themes of your books are deeply emotive. They're kind of people have been through horrible things, and you really mine the kind of emotions of your characters, and certainly, I mean, again, the reason I'm stuttering, Jacqui, is I don't want to give anything away here, but you go down certain themes that a lot of people will resonate with a lot of people, particularly around you know, why Grace ended up as she did. I'm really trying to dodge around.
I know it's difficult,
it's
isn't it?
It's so hard. It's so hard. But you know, you do it really sensitively, and you know, you cover lots of ground with that as well. You know, you cover, you know, somebody dying, you cover you know, infertility and all those sorts of things, and you know, you treat those with huge respect. They don't feel at all like plot devices. So I mean, going back to the thing around research, was there, you know, did you have to kind of speak to a lot of people about that? I mean, James has said that obviously, you know, there was a lot going on in Scotland that he could draw on, but did you have to speak to a lot of people about some of those themes, about how to kind of portray them in that super sensitive yet dramatic way that you do?
I think they're issues that are quite often, and again, like you, I'm trying to think not to say what these issues are, but I think
people are experienced enough at these panels that they know what we do. Buy the book, but just buy the books.
The issues are things that are in the news all the time, things that are covered that are becoming more widespread. People are talking about them more then, if you like. So I think that I listen to videos of people in that situation that and I know people who have gone down that route. I had to research a COVID syndrome for Mandy and her sister, because it's something that I'd heard of in a different situation. I know somebody who is a twin, and he woke up one night in the middle of the night with bad back, and he discovered the next morning that his twin had done a parachute jump out of an airplane and broken his back. At the same time, he'd woken up with this pain in his back. So these sorts of strange things, the sort of strange things that James writes about in a way, because you like those little odd things that happen that are a little bit on the supernatural side as well.
That's kind of, with my books, that was baked in from the very start, that there was always this twist of the potentially, was it supernatural, or was it just that people believed in that, which made them do the things they did? I veer very much towards it being the supernatural in my books, which is why it took me many years to get published. Yeah, I do like that sort of spooky stuff. I think it adds an extra level to particularly something which is as logical as a police investigation, when that crams up against something which is on the face of it completely illogical.
So on that point, James, Madame Rose, discuss.
where we start?
She's great.
So Madame Rose is one of those characters. She was only meant to be in one book. She was in the second book in the series, and she was literally meant to be there to impart a piece of information and then never come back again. And she's the I keep on getting asked, you know, why don't you do a Madame Rose origin story, or she could have her own series, or and if she's not in one of the books, I get complaints. So but she's just grown, but she's such an over the top wonderful character. You can just pretty much do anything you like with her, and it's she's great fun to write. I just actually last night wrote a long scene in the next book with her and Tony and the cats, and she's great.
That's a bestseller already.
Absolutely.
Yes. What more could you want? No, it's fabulous, and I think those little bits of kind of, not, I was going to say side interest, not side interest, but specialist interest. I think it just makes people kind of, you know, just look, oh. But it's interesting what you said about. I mean, I don't know if people know this. I've got triplets, and they've never known what you know. They've never had that. What's it called? What's it called, Jacqui? What's it? COVID syndrome. Yeah, they've never had that at all. They don't even know what they're doing themselves, let alone what the others are doing. No, it's really fascinating, and you know, as you say, James, you know, if that started to become, you know, a thing in a police investigation, I could just imagine in a real police investigation, I could just imagine the looks that that you'd get. You kind of say, okay, we're gonna look at this now. We're gonna look at this line of inquiry, and people would just take me out of the
But
room.
you do sometimes hear the stories of where you get that, like the psychic comes in to say where the missing child is in a dark room, and it happens in real life. But you don't
invite them in though; they just turn up.
No, they turn up, and they get it wrong just as many times as they get it right. But people only remember the times they get it right. So
Yeah, well, now we have the modern day version of that, and that's the armchair sleuths of people who are investigating everything from the comfort of their armchair and through true crime videos, true crime podcasts and things like that. So we've got about 5 minutes. We're going to go to questions. So Jacqui, what's next for Mandy?
I'm sort of struggling with book 4. She's got another death on her hands that has to be investigated, and
London buses, aren't they?
But I'm at the messy stage.
Oh, right.
It's all over the place, and I keep thinking, yes, I know what's happening now, because I don't know how you two start, but I mean, I don't know whether you're planners or pantsers then, but I start with this plan in my head. This is where it starts. This is where it finishes. I think this and this and this is going to happen in the middle. And then I start writing and I think that isn't happening. And I end up going all over the place and not knowing who's done what by the end. And you two, I don't know, both of you have got a cast of hundreds. Do you have spreadsheets to find out who your characters are?
I wish.
I normally start with a cast of thousands. I have to cut it down. That's why it's hundreds. It's because they're exactly the same reason as you. I do have a bit of a plan. I wouldn't say I was a planner, but I do have a bit of a plan. But it doesn't survive contact with the page. So so I can feel that. But yeah, it'll come through because you're brilliant at whipping it together. And I think as writers we know that. We know this is just part of the process, don't we?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. What about you, James? Where's Tony going now that he's been hauled back into the service?
Hold back in. I'm 100,000 words into book 14 and I still don't know what it's about, which is not a good sign. I don't have a title for it. I'm very much a pantser. I was slightly distracted earlier in the year because I got another book out in September, which is completely different. It's a standalone. It's not crime fiction or anything. But that was bought by my publisher rather suddenly, and I had to do edits and everything on it. So I had to put MacLean book 14 to one side, and I'm only really just getting back into where it's going. But my sort of very, very loose base idea for it, in much the same way that the last one was about sort of child abuse and the fallout in later life. This one's about vampires. And whether they exist or not, I'm not going to say. But that's my one word description. It's vampires.
And you probably don't know whether they exist because you're 100,000 words in and you still don't know what it's about.
So. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, well, good luck with that. Well, brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much. I think it's time for some questions now, and I think Sarah's going to feed us some questions. If there are any questions, if not, we will get an early finish. But I'm guessing that won't be the case.
No, there's been lots of questions, and in fact, there's been lots of love for all 3 of your books.
That's lovely. Thank you.
So some people who've read James haven't read are going to read Jacqueline's. Some who know Jacqueline's books are going to be reading yours, Graham. So I don't know when they're put up online whether or not you can see the chat, but if you can, do go and have a look because there's lots of love. Lots of questions too. So the first one, I can put 2 together actually. The question is from Gwentlyn Williams, who says, so many detectives have a fatal flaw: drink, depression, drugs. Is it necessary and is it true? And connected to that, Donna Morfett also asked, how difficult did you find it to avoid cliche? I think the 2 are very, very similar.
Okay, who wants to go first on that? Well, shall I go first on the? Is it true about the No, it's absolutely not true. You know, if you had all of those things going on in your life, you probably wouldn't be allowed to work. I think you can make detectives really, really interesting in the same way that, you know, in the way that James and Jacqui both have, by giving them everyday flaws. I tell people not to overthink their police officers. So one of their stresses and strains could be, you know, they've got caring responsibilities for somebody, or, you know, they've got a you know, in the short term, they've got a car that's going to cost them 900 quid to get through the MOT, or, you know, they've got a, you know, they're recovering from, you know, an illness or something like that. It doesn't have to be the kind of the drinking, gambling, cocaine snorting adulterer. You know, they just wouldn't survive. So I think, you know, don't overthink your characters is the thing, but give them everyday lives, because that's what they are first and foremost. I don't know what the other two think on that.
I think that's very true, and I did shy away when I first started writing the Tony McLean books. I shied away from the idea of him being alcoholic or, you know, broken marriage, or because they were even then cliches. And I kind of, the only thing I did with him, I made him independently wealthy, which is you know, an interesting, yeah, it's a nice position to be in, but it also makes for a lot of conflict within the job, because there's a lot of his colleagues are you know, very jealous of that. But yeah, I think you just need to try and make them believable people. And you know, if you were a barely functioning alcoholic, you probably wouldn't stay a detective for terribly long. You get sacked. So then the series would have to end.
Yeah, very, very abruptly.
Yeah, I think that's why I went the other way, really, because Mandy drinks green tea. She hits the gin just once, but her responsibilities to her niece really restrict her, and she's just the job. She's just, this is the truth. I've got to get to the truth. So her flaw is that she won't give up. She's just dogged and determined and almost blinkered in her desire to get to the end of the mystery, the end of the story.
I mean, and to Donna's question about how to, you know, avoiding cliche. I mean, because I'm, you know, from that world, I probably find it easier than most. But when I was writing Bad for Good, I did write one character that was very much like a very old school boss that I used to have, that was very shouty. It wasn't, you know, wasn't a dripping drinker or anything like that. Was very shouty, very aggressive, didn't listen to anybody, you know, his way or the highway. And my then agent told me to tone him down, because, you know, I'd gone totally over the top. I said, well, it's based on a real person, you know. It's actually somebody. She said, I don't care. People won't believe it. So I think, you know, readers are, and you know, agents and editors are alive to the fact that, you know, these cliches don't work, even if, as in that case, they're true.
Great. Connected to that, well, it's sort of connected to the question, is that have recent negative, this is from Diane Dixon, and have recent negative reports from some police forces given you pause for thought when writing decent, honest coppers?
Shall I take that one? Let me take that one first. So, I mean, obviously, some of the behaviours we've seen across police forces across the UK, not just the Metropolitan Police, are outrageous and criminal in the worst possible way. But, you know, I know the vast majority of police officers are good, honest, hardworking, creative, dedicated people. So I don't struggle writing good police officers, but equally I won't shy away from writing the other side as well, because I want to create, I want to paint a realistic, or I said the word realistic, an authentic world. So there are going to be bad people. There are going to be toxic cultures. There's going to be poor leadership. There's going to be cowards of silence. But equally, there's going to be some good people there on the other side too.
I think that's absolutely right. And I've had plenty of bad coppers in my books. I mean, just the last one,
Nelson,
Detective Superintendent Nelson, is a bad one. But there's so much to write about that, but on the other hand, we're trying to write interesting mystery books for people to enjoy. So we have to have some heroes in the books. But yeah, I remember particularly the Sarah Everard Vigil thing when that was all in the news, and I was very much thinking, why am I writing books lionizing the police when they're behaving so badly? And I did have to think long and hard about how to justify that, and I think that's Nelson came out of some of that, was some of my response to that.
Well, I like to think that our policemen are good, honest people, and I think that probably comes from my background, because my father was in the RUC. I had uncle in the RUC as well, and that's what I was brought up with. So I knew a lot of police persons in my upbringing, and I like them. So I like having police people who are decent, honest coppers and who want to get the job done.
And my son is in the police, and there's no one more outraged by some of the things that we're reading and seeing on the television than him. And he's a young police constable, and is in a unit that you would think would be kind of vulnerable to this kind of culture. He's like, his phrase is, on what planet do they think that's okay? And he keeps saying it every time. He just gets outraged by it. So
great. That's that. So we have another question from Sharon Gray. How do you keep up with new processes? That's interesting, because I suppose, Graham, you've left the police now, and I'm sure there's lots of new stuff coming in. But how do you sort of keep on top of what's coming in terms of policing?
So is that for me? So yeah, I mean, I kind of, I read widely around policing. I've got a lot of friends that are still within the police or recently retired from the police. I kind of keep up to date on developments in forensics, in technology, in the law. I've people that know the way I work is that I've got probably, I think, 25 other people that provide advice under my kind of website, in different specialist areas. So and if I don't know something, I'll go and find it out. So if an author asks me something, I won't just guess it. I'll find it out, and then we'll work out how to dramatize that.
Right.
I think. Sorry, I was just going to add to that. I mean, what I'd said earlier before, I kind of avoid procedure as much as possible. So it kind of avoids the need to keep up. That there are, one or two things that you pick up from reading other authors' books or from watching reading the news or whatever, that you can incorporate. But unless it's a big change like Police Scotland, then I don't really do anything to keep up with it.
Ditto.
I've got a very specific question for James. Is there another Constance Fairchild novel coming?
I keep on getting asked this. I have plans for one. I've struggled to have time to write it, and I don't actually have a contract with the publisher for one at the moment. So I know what I want her to do next and what I want to do with her next, but it's not in the scheduling at the moment. So it would, if I did get one, it would be a couple of years out yet. But thank you for the continued interest. Everybody's
It's nice to be asked, isn't it? It's nice,
absolutely.
Yeah. Really
Sorry, that was from Harry Taylor. I should have said who it was.
Thanks, Harry.
Yeah. And a final question. This was the first question that came through, actually, from Alex Hawley. He's a debut writer, and he wanted to sort of, it's a nice question to finish on. Do you have any advice for someone trying to start out on a police procedure? Where do you start?
Just write. Just get on with it. And read a lot.
I think I would say, get your characters, be true to your characters, and finish your first draft. Your first draft doesn't have to be good, but it does have to be finished. And I'd say that for any writer in any genre. And get something down on the page, and then find the bits in it that work for you and work on them.
And I would say, don't get hung up on the procedure. If use the procedure as sparingly as you need to drive your story and your characters forward, and that's all. And I know Alex. I know Alex is a vociferous crime reader, and good luck on the debut, Alex. But just don't get too hung up on it. Just tell the story and then work out what procedure you need around that, if any.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. And so that's the end of the panel. Thank you for all those brilliant questions, everybody. Thank you to Anna for the reading at the beginning, and of course to Jacqui and James for making this I mean, I've really enjoyed it. I've had a fabulous. I keep looking at the clock thinking, I'm going so quickly. So thank you so much for your friendship and your the chat that we've had, and good luck with the new projects. Thanks to Sarah for marshalling all those questions, and thank you of course to Will Crimmer for keeping for this festival and keeping it going and making it accessible online. And I do apologise for any of my Welsh pronunciation, but I am only a quarter Welsh, so I'm getting there. But thank you ever so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.